You're sitting in the wreckage of a marriage that's ending, and the guilt is eating you alive. Maybe you tried everything: counseling, prayer, compromise, until you lost yourself completely. Maybe they left you, or maybe you finally found the courage to leave them. Either way, you're drowning in shame because you couldn't make it work. And if you have children, that guilt multiplies tenfold because you know your decision doesn't just affect you. I'm Harmony Ziba, and I understand that right now, your marriage feels like it's beyond repair. If you have children, you're tormented by an impossible choice: sacrifice yourself to keep your children's family intact, or choose your well-being, knowing it will disrupt their world. Before we talk about divorce as spiritual rebirth, let's be honest about the work that needs to happen first. Sometimes marriages can be saved when both people are willing to do the deep, hard work. Sometimes they cannot. Today, we're going to explore both possibilities with wisdom and grace. If you're watching this and your marriage is struggling but not yet over, listen carefully. Before you make any permanent decisions, you owe it to yourself, your spouse, and your children to exhaust every reasonable option for healing. This doesn't mean staying in abuse or accepting treatment that destroys your soul. It means being intentional about the path you choose. First, have you had the honest conversation, not the one where you hint at your unhappiness or complain about surface issues? The conversation where you look your spouse in the eye and say, "Our marriage is in crisis. I am deeply unhappy. We need professional help, or we're headed towards separation." Many marriages die from lack of clear communication about how serious the problems have become. Have you tried professional counseling with someone trained in marriage therapy? Not your pastor who means well but lacks clinical training. Not your friend who gives good advice but isn't equipped for serious intervention. A licensed therapist who specializes in couples work and can help you both examine patterns, improve communication, and address underlying issues that may be destroying your connection. Have you addressed any mental health issues, addictions, or unresolved trauma that might be poisoning your relationship? Sometimes marriages fail, not because people don't love each other, but because untreated depression, anxiety, addiction, or past wounds make healthy relationship impossible. Individual therapy alongside couples work can sometimes save marriages that seem hopeless. Have you prayed specifically for wisdom about whether this marriage can be healed? Or have you only prayed for your spouse to change? God sometimes calls us to stay and fight for restoration. Sometimes God calls us to leave for our protection and growth. Prayer should include asking for discernment about which path serves love best, not just begging for your circumstances to improve. Have you given real change enough time to take root? If your spouse has acknowledged problems and is actively working to address them through therapy, medication, or behavior changes, healing takes time. But there's a difference between someone who is genuinely committed to transformation and someone who makes promises to avoid consequences, but returns to old patterns once the pressure decreases. Here's what you need to understand about when enough is enough. If you've had the honest conversation multiple times and your spouse refuses to acknowledge problems or seek help, you've done what you can. If you've attended counseling, but your spouse sabotages the process, blames you for everything, or attends only to appease you while refusing to change, you've tried. If mental health or addiction issues exist, but your spouse refuses treatment, you cannot save someone who won't save themselves. Let's address the elephant in the room: your children. You lie awake at night, wondering if you're destroying their lives. You see the stress they're already experiencing from the conflict in your home, and wonder if divorce would make it worse. You feel selfish for wanting to be happy, when happiness seems to come at your children's expense. You wonder if other parents are stronger than you, more capable of enduring a broken marriage for their kids' sake. But here's what I need you to understand. Your children don't need perfect parents who stay married at any cost. They need healthy parents who model what love actually looks like. When you stay in a marriage where there's constant conflict, emotional distance, or one person diminishing themselves to keep peace, you're teaching your children devastating lessons about relationships. Children are watching everything. They absorb the tension in the house. They learn what normal looks like from your relationship. If normal means walking on eggshells, managing someone else's emotions, or accepting disrespectful treatment, that becomes their blueprint for future relationships. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to teach them that this is what love looks like. The pain you're feeling about potentially disrupting your children's lives is evidence of how much you love them. A parent who didn't care wouldn't agonize over this decision, but love sometimes requires courage to make choices that feel devastating in the short term, but are healing in the long term. Children can recover from divorce, especially with proper support, but they might never recover from growing up in a home where love was twisted into something harmful. If you've genuinely exhausted all reasonable options for healing your marriage, if you've done the work, but your spouse refuses to do theirs, if you've given change time to take root, but see no sustainable transformation, then divorce may not be failure. It may be wisdom. It may not be giving up. It may be choosing life over slow death for both you and your children. Let me tell you something that might surprise you. Sometimes divorce is not the opposite of faith. It's the highest expression of it. When you choose to leave a marriage that's destroying your soul after you've tried everything possible to save it, you're choosing to honor the life God gave you. When you refuse to stay in a relationship that has become toxic despite your best efforts to heal it, you're choosing truth over pretense. I know that faithful people in your life may be questioning your decision. They mean well when they quote scripture about commitment and perseverance. They love you when they suggest more counseling, more prayer, more patience. But they weren't living your life. They weren't experiencing the daily erosion of your peace, your confidence, your connection with God. They didn't try everything you tried before reaching this difficult conclusion. God never intended for marriage to be a prison where you lose your identity, your voice, your peace. Marriage was designed to be a partnership where both people grow, support each other's flourishing, and create something beautiful together. When marriage becomes a place where one person diminishes while the other refuses to change, when love becomes fear and intimacy becomes conflict, that's not the sacred design. That's a distortion of it. Right now, you're probably drowning in self-doubt. You replay every conversation with your spouse, every counseling session, every prayer for healing that seemed to go unanswered. You wonder if you could have been more patient, more forgiving, more understanding. But there comes a point where trying harder in a relationship that's fundamentally broken becomes self-destruction, not love. The judgment you're experiencing is real and painful. Some people will always believe that divorce is failure, regardless of what you endured or attempted. They'll suggest that if you prayed more, submitted more, or loved more sacrificially, your marriage would have survived. But they don't understand that some marriages die not from lack of effort, but from one person's refusal to address serious problems despite repeated opportunities to do so. Let's talk about what divorce can mean in spiritual terms when it comes after genuine attempts at restoration. It's death and resurrection. The person you were in that marriage, the one who tried everything, adapted constantly, and lost pieces of yourself, hoping for change that never came. That version is dying. And that's not a tragedy when it follows faithful effort. That's transformation. You're not losing yourself through divorce after doing the work. You're finding yourself. You're not becoming less than you were. You're becoming who you actually are when you're not constantly trying to save a relationship with someone who won't participate in its healing. This isn't failure when you've genuinely tried everything reasonable. This is choosing life after fighting for resurrection and finding it impossible. Every spiritual tradition speaks of death and rebirth as necessary for growth. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, our marriages have to end for our authentic lives to begin. When this follows genuine attempts at healing, it's not failure, it's completion. It's not punishment. It's preparation for something healthier than what you're leaving behind. I know you're scared. Scared of being alone. Scared of financial struggles. Scared of what people will think. Scared that you'll never love or be loved again. Scared that you've damaged your children. If you're a woman, you might fear you're too old to start over. If you're a man, you might worry about losing connection with your children or being seen as a failure as a provider and protector. These fears are real, but they're not prophetic. Fear tells you what might happen. Faith tells you what's possible when you've done everything you could to save something that ultimately couldn't be saved. What's possible is that your life after divorce will be more authentic, more peaceful, and more aligned with who God created you to be than your married life ever was, especially when divorce follows faithful attempts at restoration. Your divorce, when it comes after doing the work, is also teaching your children something invaluable. You're showing them that love includes boundaries. You're demonstrating that adults make hard choices after trying everything possible. You're modeling that people have the right to pursue healing even when others won't join them in that pursuit. You're proving that sometimes endings follow beginnings, and that's part of life's complexity. Let's address the spiritual aspect of this journey. Maybe you prayed for years for your marriage to work. Maybe you begged God to change your spouse, participated in counseling, worked on yourself, and still watched your marriage deteriorate. When change didn't come despite your faithful efforts, you might have felt abandoned by God. But what if God honored your efforts while also preparing a different path for your healing? The God who created you doesn't want you to destroy yourself trying to save something that requires two people's participation, but only has one person's commitment. The God who loves you sees every effort you made, every counseling session you attended, every prayer you prayed for restoration. Your willingness to fight for your marriage was beautiful. Your eventual decision to leave after exhausting reasonable options can be equally sacred. Now let's talk about the rebirth process that follows not giving up too easily, but recognizing when you've given enough. This isn't something that happens overnight. Spiritual rebirth after doing the work happens in phases that are different from impulsive decisions. First comes peace about your decision. When you know you tried everything reasonable, grief is cleaner. You're not mourning your failure. You're mourning the impossibility of saving something alone. After that clean grief comes the wilderness season. You feel uncertain about the future, but not regretful about the past. You don't know who you are outside of that relationship, but you're not haunted by wondering what if, because you explored those possibilities. Your children are adjusting, but they also witnessed your efforts to save their family before making the difficult choice to end it. Then comes the awakening. When divorce follows genuine attempts at restoration, the awakening often includes gratitude for your own capacity to love deeply, try faithfully, and choose wisely when love alone wasn't enough. You start making choices based on what's healthy, not what avoids conflict. You begin to trust your judgment because you exercised it responsibly throughout this process. This rebirth process is deeply spiritual because it's built on integrity. You're not just recovering from a relationship. You're moving forward knowing you honored your commitments while also honoring your need for growth and healing. You're rediscovering prayer as honest conversation with a God who walked through your marriage struggles with you and supports your difficult but necessary decision. Your worth was never tied to your ability to single-handedly save your marriage. You were not more valuable when you were married and less valuable now. You are not damaged goods. You are not a failure as a spouse or parent. You are someone who tried everything reasonable, fought for love, and chose truth when love alone wasn't sufficient to heal what was broken. As you move forward, you'll discover that having done the work changes everything about your future relationships. You'll have clarity about what healthy partnership looks like. Your children will understand that you didn't give up easily, that sometimes adults make hard choices after trying everything possible. You'll attract people who respect your integrity rather than those who might exploit your willingness to accept dysfunction. If you're watching this and still married, please hear this. Try everything reasonable before making permanent decisions. Have the honest conversations. Get professional help. Address individual issues that impact your relationship. Give change time to take root. But also know that if you do this work faithfully and nothing changes, choosing to leave doesn't make you a failure. It makes you someone who knows the difference between love and self-destruction. If you're already divorced after doing this work, stop second-guessing your decision. You honored your marriage by fighting for it. You honored yourself by recognizing when the fight was futile. You honored your children by showing them what it looks like to try everything reasonable before making life-changing decisions. You don't owe anyone further explanation or justification. Your divorce, when it follows faithful effort, is not your identity, but it is part of your story. It's the chapter where you learned that you can love deeply without losing yourself completely. It's the season where you discovered that God's love for you includes support for difficult but necessary decisions. It's the time when you chose healing over hope for change that never materialized. As we close, remember that your story continues with integrity intact. You tried, you hoped, you worked, you prayed. When those efforts weren't enough to save your marriage, you chose life over slow death. And that choice honors both the love you gave and the life you've been given. Your rebirth isn't just possible. It's earned through the faithful work you did before letting go. If this message resonated with your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear about the sacred work of trying everything before choosing divorce, and the sacred choice of divorce when everything has been tried. Subscribe for more content that honors both the fight to save love and the wisdom to recognize when love alone isn't enough. Your spiritual rebirth, when it follows faithful effort, is not just healing, it's holy. Trust that the same God who witnessed your attempts to save your marriage supports your decision to save yourself when those attempts weren't reciprocated. You are not walking this path alone, and neither are your children. They're walking it with someone who taught them what commitment looks like and what wisdom sounds like when commitment alone isn't sufficient. Your story is not ending with divorce. It's beginning with rebirth. You are not broken. You are breaking free. The person emerging from this fire is stronger, wiser, and more authentic than who you were before. This ending is not your defeat. It's your declaration that you believe in love too much to settle for its counterfeit. Your greatest chapter is not behind you. It's waiting to be written.